Good day and welcome to the BIM for Infrastructure's webinar series. Today, we're going to be looking at moving your agency to digital delivery. Next slide, Randy. So first, I'm going to go over some housekeeping and a couple of things. Today, we are going to be recording the call, and that will be available on our HEAP website at some point, and we'll let you know on that. As you come into this event, it's going to show you as anonymous, so don't worry about that. That's just the way this platform works. And if you type a message, you can type your name or you can just stay as anonymous. It doesn't matter either way. If you're having issues with your audio, the likelihood is you either have us muted or your volume's at 0, and you'll need to change the settings on your computer's sound. Next slide. So this is kind of what we expect you to be seeing. If you want to look at the Q&A box up in the top right, as you can see, just click that icon and that'll activate the Q&A. And this event is broadcast live, but there's a scroll bar down at the bottom that you can kind of go back and forth if you step away or whatever, and you can see something that's happened in the past. Next slide. So let me introduce this webinar. Today, as I said, we're going to be talking about bringing your agency or organization to digital delivery. Next slide. So before I go into the interview or the overview, I just wanted to say these webinars do not just happen. There was a lot of planning that went into it. And on behalf of HEAP, TRB, and Building Smart USA, I just wanted to have a special thanks to Will Sharp, Sandra Larson, Chess Meyer, Alexa Mitchell, Ben Jilk, John Wilkerson, Michael Kennerly, and Ahmed Abu Awash. From the HEAP organization, Elaine Richard and Randy Robinson. From TRB, Lance Parvey, and Ian Howell from Building Smart USA chapter. So with that, today, the overview is that in this industry, this workshop is going to be the second in the series, and it's basically looking at the opportunities and challenges that are presented from that shift from traditional plan or paper-based delivery to basically a building information modeling and digital or model-based delivery throughout the US. This workshop is going to provide insights on the practical application of BIM and model-based, and we're going to have some great discussions from a number of presenters. Next slide. Our sponsors and collaborators today are the HEAP organization, and Randy, I'm showing one slide, maybe we've moved. Actually, this is the correct slide. Before I go into the collaborators and sponsors, today on our agenda, we've got 3 sessions set up. The first is an introductory session, and it's basically just national perspectives on what's going on with Committee on Design, the JTC EES, pooled fund studies, and then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the industry definitions for BIM. Also, this is going to be building the case for open standards and BIM in the industry, and then we're going to have a panel discussion that's going to be prefaced by sort of DOT agency and the maturity, and also contractor and the maturity as well. And then we'll wrap up the webinar and go from there. Next slide. So, as I started to say, our sponsors today, first sponsor that is a HEAP organization. It's a great organization that's promoting the use of innovation and technology. It's been around for 60 years or so. Conference is coming up soon, and Elaine's going to talk about that in just a second. Our second sponsor and collaborator is TRB, and Lance Parvey is going to be representing them today. And then if you can go 2 more slides, Randy. Our third is Building Smart USA, and Ian Howell will be giving a presentation as well today. Next slide. So with that, I'm going to hand this over to Elaine Richard, and she's going to give sort of an overview of HEAP and the conference that's coming up. Very excited that it's going to be live. Elaine?
Oh, hello, everyone. Yeah, I just wanted to fill everybody in on the conference that's coming up. So, Randy, can you please bring up the HEAP website and go to the bottom of the screen where the pictures are? Okay, so if you go to www.heap.org, we have our the bottom of our screen, we have our announcements of where our next 3 HEAP conferences are going to be. So this year, we are proud to announce and happy to announce that we are going to be having an in-person event conference in the end of November, beginning of December. So if you go to heap.org and then you click on the picture of Hartford there, it'll bring you to our conference website. So our conference again will be November 30th to December 2nd in Hartford, Connecticut. And can you bring up the registration page, please, Randy? To the top. And yeah, nope, to the next to home, presenter, sponsorship, registration. Yeah, perfect. Yep. Okay, so our early bird registration is going to be until August 15th at $550. And then after that, the rates are going to go up from there. It includes a 3D conference. It's a little shorter than we've had in the past, but we're just happy to be able to have something and get together and put on a great conference. If you are interested in presenters, so next to home, there's a presenters tab. Randy, if you could go to the presenters page. So our call for presentations is also available at this time. We have a deadline of January 25th. If you would like to present, please get your submission in by then. And we have a submittal link that kind of walks you through. Yeah, you can click on that. So it'll walk you through everything that you need to submit, which will just be a short abstract and your information. And you can go back to the HEAP website, and I will bring, well, the last thing I'll talk about is sponsorship. So our sponsorship information is also available, and Hausman Associates will be handling all that. So if you're interested in being a sponsor, please contact Ernie and fill out a form and get that back to him. And all the benefits are also on the page, so you guys can read through that and see if you're interested in sponsoring. We'd love to hear from you. So I think that's all I have. We're really excited to be able to have everybody in person. So please register, and we look forward to seeing you. And now I'm going to hand for the next session, I'm going to hand this off to Will Sharp.
Yeah, thanks, Elaine. I'm Will Sharp with HDR, and going to introduce our first section on the webinar, the National BIM Perspectives in Transportation. And this introductory plenary session, we're going to talk about a number of topics. We're going to start with an update of our AASHTO Joint Technical Committee on Electronic Engineering and Standards, and then give you updates on the BIM for Infrastructure Pooled Fund. And then John Wilkerson with Michigan DOT is going to walk us through a BIM terminology game. So going into the update for the AASHTO Joint Technical Committee on Electronic Engineering Standards, Mike Kennerly was scheduled to give this update, and unfortunately Mike had a conflict that came up late. I know he really wanted to be part of this webinar, but I'll be providing the update today for Mike. So the Joint Technical Committee on Electronic Engineering Standards, this has been a great group to work with. I've been part of this committee, I think, about 3 years. This is a committee that includes Federal Highway Administration, AASHTO, a number of state DOTs, And they've also invited many other stakeholders to participate, including ACEC and AGC. And this is one, my role on this committee is one of 2 ACEC representatives. I work very closely with John Rathke with Mead and Hunt as well. But this has just been a great group to work with as we move toward digital delivery. So one thing I wanted to highlight with this group is back in fall of 2019, our committee developed a resolution to adopt IFC as the standard for the state DOTs. And this resolution was unanimously passed at the AASHTO fall meeting. So IFC is the schema as the national standard for the AASHTO states. Also with this resolution, AASHTO is setting up a new cross-committee multidisciplinary group to implement that IFC schema. So that is ongoing. And AASHTO is also considering joining Building Smart International, which is the international nonprofit that maintains the IFC standard. So this is very foundational, very critical to our movement toward model as a legal document and digital delivery. So the focus areas of JTCES, we have a number. This is a very active committee. We have many subcommittees as well. There's actually 5 of those. Level of development is, I think we've spent the most time on that subcommittee. John Wilkerson with Michigan DOT is going to talk about that in just a minute. He's leading that subcommittee. We've also got model as the legal document and, moving your projects toward model as legal document. George Lukes chairs that subcommittee. He's going to talk for a couple minutes on that. We've also got a webinar series, asset management, and the BIM maturity model. And we'll cover all these except the BIM maturity model. That will be covered later in the presentation. So with that, I'll turn it over, John, to you to talk about level of development.
Thanks, Will. So as Will noted, we had representatives from all those areas of the JTCES in the level development subcommittee. And we've been working on this for over 2 years, and we really kind of started by looking at what a few states had done. Michigan was one of them. I think Utah had some stuff, and maybe Iowa and Florida were starting to investigate it. But we could combine that with what ACEC had done, what NIBS has done. We even looked at some of the Corps of Engineers information. And then we broke all that down to educate ourselves, and we brought in some experts to kind of explain it to us. And there were some pretty long, drawn-out discussions that we had. But we decided to kind of start from scratch and see. One of the things we really wanted to try to do is not do a 350 like the vertical industry had done, and see if we could set a 300 that would work, and set the levels that could work and be flexible for every agency. But we went through this process, as you can see in the slide, where we looked at the fundamental definitions of level development. And then we put that into a model element breakdown structure. We looked at the assets and started to try to assign a level development, thinking about full maturity of digital delivery and model development and what it would look like based off of each element. Then we went back and looked at the delivery requirements again, and then we'd go back. I think we've cycled through probably 2 or 3 times as we revisited different new ideas, and there are some new ideas that we're starting to consider now as some of us go through BIM certification. But we have a target of getting some draft materials to AASHTO by this fall to really build out a framework, not necessarily a final spec, but like a framework that can be built upon, that would really include all those things that level development supports: the model element breakdown structure, BIM execution plan, your model progression spec, those types of things. And we're also meeting with ACEC again here in July to kind of go over where we're at and see where we're going next. So that's kind of what we're doing with the level development. I'll turn it over to George to cover some of the other committees.
Thanks, John. So I'm leading the model as the legal document subcommittee, and one of the things that we're looking at is, and Randy, it looks like we're 1 slide past. Yeah. our approach has been, and this is not just the model as legal document, it's actually the maturity as well, but we've looked at essentially 5 different levels where you're starting to leverage 3D, and then ultimately you're delivering the model contractually, and you're requiring asset management that's captured in the field as digital as-builts. And so at each one of those levels, there's a suggestion of what a DOT or an organization would do to be able to leverage that level. So some DOTs will be starting with 3D models, and other DOTs may already be collecting information in the field, but this is kind of the intent here, is to give some guidance on how to do this. So what that suggestion is maximizing that progress and what other DOTs may have done that's helped with that. And then also with those other DOTs, hopefully what we're going to be doing is what we call R&D, which is rip off and duplicate. So next slide. So with that, on the models of legal documents, some of the guidance examples are, have an implementation plan. That's really helpful, just so that you've got something that you can look at and see what your progress is. Champions are great for, instead of taking your entire organization at one time, you've got a champion that can take and do a pilot project and then show the success. Having workshops with all of the stakeholders is really nice. File structure, super important. Implementation costs, what is the investment? Communication plans, trainings, things of that nature. And as John suggested, and I think Will may go over as well, or I guess it would be John in the 3rd session, we expect to have something, or this is our goal in the fall, to be able to put out so that organizations can look at this and kind of see where they fit and some of the suggestions that would be to get them there. So with that, I believe I'm turning this over to Will, right?
That's right, George. Thanks. So a couple of other subcommittees we have. Jennifer Lloyd with Tennessee DOT is leading the webinar series subcommittee. And this has been really good because we've had a lot of detailed discussions within our committee, but we really want to get the word out to other states and other folks in the industry. So we have completed 5 webinars to date, starting with an introduction to BIM and going through IFC, going through the chief engineer's perspective on model as legal document, and all the way through to using BIM with asset management. So all of these webinars are available on the link at the bottom of this slide, and we will provide all these slides to everyone after the webinar so you can refer to this. We also plan on doing additional future webinars. I know at our last meeting earlier this month, we identified 7 additional topics that we're considering for future webinars, and the series will restart in September. So definitely keep an eye on that. I also want to touch on asset management. This is a committee that Bill Pratt with Connecticut DOT is leading, and this has been a very, very interesting process. Bill is looking into capability maturity models, and really, I know he's looked in particular at the GIST maturity models and how that applies to us. How we move digital delivery all the way through to asset management, and how can you get your organization ready? And what are the software requirements and hardware requirements and workforce issues, those sorts of things. So really, we all understand this is a big paradigm shift for all of us. Bill has also been looking at gathering asset classifications and how do those fit within the IFC framework that AASHTO adopted as our data schema. And I think the graphic on this slide really explains it well, what we're trying to achieve. And it's really using that really asset management information should be captured all the way through the project lifecycle, all the way from concept development through prelim, final, construction, and digital as-builts. So that is really the goal of this group, is to really develop a process to capture all that key information as we go. So the next steps with JTCES, one of those is Mike Kennerly announced at our meeting earlier this month that AASHTO has identified a chair for this new cross-disciplinary committee to oversee the IFC adoption. That's Mike Boozleman with Montana DOT. So we're really excited to see that group start to get stood up. Our group is also working on publishing draft guidelines this fall to get those out to to anyone that's interested. I know John Wilkerson's been working hard on the level of development framework and getting that draft out. And then Mike Kennerly and George and others are working on the BIM maturity model guidance and really developing guidance on how you move your agency from wherever you're at in the process to full digital delivery, including digital as-builts. So look for that guidance later this fall. So I also am going to be covering the BIM for Infrastructure pooled fund update for Mike as well. So the pooled fund, and we talked about this at our March webinar, we've added several states since the March webinar. So we're up to 10 states for the pooled fund, as well as FHWA. And the preliminary scope of work, you can see the bullets there below. The way this has been explained to me is this is really an extension and expansion of the ongoing BIM for Bridges and Structures transportation pooled fund efforts, really to expand that to all the transportation elements. So current status with this pooled fund, I'm really happy to announce in the last couple of weeks, this is now an official pooled fund. We have met our minimum funding obligations on this. So this is TPF 5480, but Catherine Petros asked me to say, though, we're still looking for other states and other agencies to join. So if you haven't joined, if you're interested, please contact the folks at the bottom of this slide. I know some of the early activities with this pooled fund, they are in the process of scheduling a technical advisory committee kickoff meeting with all the pooled fund participants. And in talking with Carl and with Catherine, some of the early priorities on this pooled fund include refining the pooled fund scope. That would consider the work from the BIM for Bridges and Structures project, as well as the national BIM roadmap that FHWA has developed, and also looking at developing a consultant RFP late this year. So if you have interest in learning more, feel free to contact the folks at the bottom of this slide. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to John Wilkerson for the BIM terminology game.
Okay, as if some of you, I think we have like just under 30 folks that have joined the challenge, but there's the link right there. If somebody can announce it in the Q&A, that would be great with the link. You should be able to just click on the link and it should take you right to it, and then you have to type in a nickname. Try to keep it clean, please, and then go through the questions. We felt like this would be a better way to do this instead of somebody sitting up here just talking about terms for several minutes. So feel free to go through it. The scoring does account for how quickly you answer the question in a Kahoot if you haven't done those before, but we're going to be showing the leaderboard later at the end of the webinar by percent correct answer, because we're more interested in the responses that you consider to inform the engagements in the future webinars. The questions are generally 30 seconds to 1 minute. Some of the later questions are 1 minute because they're multi-part. So feel free to take the quiz at any time during the webinar. Keep in mind it will continue going once you start it. So can you go to the next slide? So why terminology? Why is it important to be consistent? I know Ian Howe is going to get into this a little bit more later, but we really want to, looking at what the lumber or timber, depending on what country you're in, industry did a long time ago. It helped them drive where we are today. I can't imagine where we would all be without that. Really, we would just want to make sure we have a good, consistent way to communicate with each other as we all move forward towards BIM.
We need on the quantity takeoffs for that lumber, John, it's all gone up. So we needed some QTO on that. My name is Lance Barvey. We're going to be talking about building the business case for open standards in BIM and transportation. Next slide. I'm with WSP, BIM Services Director, and also TRB co-chair for the BIM for Infrastructure subcommittee with Chuck Hickson from Digital Construction Works. Next slide. I have the I have the pleasure of introducing some of the presenters today for building a business case for BIM. Ian Howell is principal consultant for Built Environment Strategies, and he's also engaged as the U.S. representative for Building Smart International, supporting the U.S. chapter. He previously worked at Autodesk, Blue Line Online, Newforma, and other firms. Morgan Kessler is with FHWA, and he is the Highway Research Civil Engineer for the Infrastructure Preservation and Asset Management Team at Turner Fairbanks Highway Research Center, and provides national applied research and technical assistance to FHWA and its partners. Alexa Mitchell is with HDR. She's Transportation BIM's program manager and brings over 20 years of experience in highway design and construction automation. And lastly, Eric Silwick is with Sun Construction. He leads their frontline construction technologies and focuses on BIM digital tools and construction technologies, delivering models from the office to the field. And so with that, I'm just going to hand it over to Ian Howell, and as he starts the presentation.
Thank you, Lance. I've been given 7 minutes to answer the question, what is the value of open standards? And on the next slide, I wanted to share with you where my journey as an advocate for open standards started back in 2005, when NIST published a report based on an analysis that inadequate interoperability was costing the US capital facilities industry $15.8 billion per year. And one of the key contributing factors that they identified was lack of standardization in the industry. So that was 2005. If we wind the clock forward to the next slide, in 2021, here we are that the European Union BIM task group is still currently discussing and debating the need for interoperability and the need for standards that are going to get rid of some of the waste in our industry because of the fragmented nature, because of the multiple phases, the different stakeholders, etc. So the problem has not gone away, even though we've made a lot of progress. So I wanted to share on the next two slides, but starting with the first, a tale of two airports. If we can go back, the first one is actually London Heathrow Terminal 5. And I chose airports as a project type because there's a lot of horizontal construction with roadways, bridges, rail links, as well as vertical construction. And in the case of Terminal 5, that was the new terminal and also a 600-bed hotel. And they went after standardization in 2008 by doing a lot of innovative things. And I've got them there as a list in the center of the slide. They co-located a 2,000-person project team. They literally put them in one physical space. They put in an completely dedicated computer network. They selected a proprietary set of software solutions, which were the only ones that were allowed to be used on the project. They standardized on some proprietary file formats, and then the project was large enough and went for long enough that they were able to run some continuous improvement processes. So the result of that standardization was a huge proof point for the industry. They were able to deliver a very complex project on time, within budget, and to high quality. You very rarely hear that mega projects are delivered on time and within budget. However, it was very unique to Terminal 5. What we learned after that success story was that those things weren't really repeatable on what we would call a normal scale project. So the second airport project that I wanted to share dates to 2020, which is the Auckland Airport project. Randy, we've gone the wrong way there. If we could go to Auckland. That's it. Where they basically were trying to pull together a master plan looking at a lot of existing buildings and facilities, as well as new construction that was planned to try and take a federated look at the entire airport as a master plan. And they did that using open standards. Very different approach to what had happened on Terminal 5 many, many years before. And they were able to take 100 disparate models and successfully geolocate them using the IFC standard with 250,000 elements modeled just for the new terminal building. They put in information delivery requirements for the future use of this information for asset information management. And basically were award winners at our Building Smart International Award competition for the use of open BIM. So a very, very different open standards approach to being able to design, construct, and manage an airport. On the next slide, you'll see that this isn't just applicable to airports. This is an example in Germany of a 65-kilometer stretch of roadway where IFC was used as an open standard to really federate the information from 36 different BIM users across 8 different companies, 20 different models from 5 disciplines, 6 different software applications were used, and 1.3 million objects were federated. So this is a wonderful example as to why AASHTO are looking at the IFC schema as a national standard for engineering data, because it really shows that open standards can provide productivity and efficiency. This was a special mention for team collaboration in our awards. So over the page, I wanted just to review and go through this with you as what are the lessons learned from those project examples. If we look at the left, yes, on the old approach, you can dictate a single technology stack, but the downside of doing so is that you sacrifice best-in-class functionality. That best-in-class choice is available through open standards. In other words, different software can be used by different consultants from their own offices. You can standardize on one proprietary file format, but then you're locked into a specific vendor and you don't have choice. You can use some data conversion methods, which have been tried at various times, but there's normally data loss associated with that versus open standards, which enable data exchange. Different vendors give you siloed information. And coming back to a standard definition allows for data sharing in work processes and federation of models. A single vendor can be easy in a way, but it does mean that the vendor controls your data. It is locked normally in a proprietary file format. And I would argue that it's much more important for owners to control their own destiny. You can certainly use different software applications, but that brings with it a lot of duplicate effort in terms of data entry, whereas open standards allow information to be exchanged, shared, and reused. From a legacy perspective, software does get out of date and old software versions become redundant. And there is a lot of waste in recreating information, whereas open standards really provide longevity and data preservation. So the results of old methods are typically duplication, inconsistencies, errors, wasted effort, and extra cost. It's all part of that lack of interoperability problem that was first identified by NIST and is still being addressed today, versus open standards, which really provide accessibility, interoperable software, optimized work processes, and protects the value of the information over the long term. If we could go to the next slide, we keep talking about interoperability and interoperable solutions, and I've tried to put a definition here to be sure that we understand what that means. Interoperability requires that 2 or more people, organizations, or software applications use a common semantic and format standard when communicating. In other words, you've got to have a common language. And that common language we all use, even in having this conversation together today, is about words that are defined in a dictionary that we all have common meaning for. We use sentence structures and grammar and paragraphs to be able to use that language effectively. And for our industry, we need to have that same discipline. The example previously was from the timber industry. But the industry-specific language that we use for buildings and infrastructure is around walls, doors, windows, guardrails, curbs, abutments. And we also have to describe concepts like spaces, alignment, span, camber, cantilever. And all of these objects need to have properties, relationships, parameters, and values defined. And that is what's captured in what we call the IFC schema, which is essentially a industry-specific vocabulary which provides for common understanding, consistency. It allows us to communicate, collaborate, and coordinate our work. On the next slide, I just want to be clear that that the IFC has a number of domains, but they're all within the world of buildings and infrastructure. So it is roads, bridges, tunnels, ports and waterways, railways, geotechnical, which is clearly important because it's the foundation for buildings and bridges and roadways, alignment. So these are all part of the extensions that are covered by the new IFC 4.3 standard that AASHTO is adopting. Over the page, it's also clear that one standard does not provide everything the industry needs, and we represent this in this pyramid diagram as what we call layers of standardization. So at the very top, you have very generic definitions, typically ISO standards. 19650 is a framework, but it isn't implementable as such. You need this next level on the pyramid, which is the industry or domain-specific extensions, of which IFC is an example on the left, which is obviously for BIM, and then on the right I've given a couple of examples as relates to GIS. So we need more than a single standard, but IFC is certainly foundational as part of that domain-specific layer. Then the third level of the pyramid, going down from top to bottom, is national classification systems, which exist and we all use, all the way down to company or organization specific agreements where it might relate to a single product family or it might relate to a single project, which is what we capture in the Building Smart Data Dictionary as an extension of the IFC model. If we go to the next slide, sorry, back one, please, Randy. Other way. That's it. Thank you. So in addition to IFC and Building Smart Data Dictionary, there are a number of services that are also needed to make this standard solution work. Use case management is where implementers, consultants, DOTs, for example, can identify and capture requirements. And in addition to support for open file formats and open APIs, in other words, methods of accessing the standard data, we also define information delivery specifications, which is for the automated checking of exchange information requirements, and a BIM collaboration format. So think of all of this together on the next slide, please, Randy, as what we call open BIM. How do you leverage not just the IFC schema and the extensions through the dictionary to meet the requirements that are captured in a use case management scenario and a work process, and use the information delivery specification to ensure compliance with what's needed, for example, in the asset information model, and the BIM collaboration format during construction. So a set of standards and services that work together, and that Building Smart have built, but not in isolation. On the next slide, we'll see that Building Smart partners, no, back one, please, Randy. Building Smart partners, other way, with other standards organizations. OGC is one you're probably all familiar with, the Open Geospatial Consortium when it comes to GIS, and others. We certainly work with ISO and CEN in terms of international standards. GS1, the barcode people that look at trade identification and georeferencing information. Digital Twin Consortium. So these are all players that bring something to the table that we want to work with. And on the next slide, I really wanted to map some of the integration where Building Smart is working together with these other organizations. So for example, if there's signaling equipment in the ETEM model for product specification, it could have a global trade identification number from GS1, which would be assigned as an IFC property that would be located in a land infra model that could be part of a digital twin. So this idea of integration and sharing of information is so powerful and so important. On the next slide. I just wanted to mention that we have a lot of vendor support for open standards. So Keith Bentley, for example, is talking about the only real approach to making an industry-wide transformation is for people to organize around open standards, and that can make a huge difference as to whether your data is valuable in the long term or not. On the next slide. Andrew Agnost from Autodesk. Interoperability is the key to a successful digital future, and that organizations like Building Smart can help drive home the critical process changes that are needed to happen. And on the next slide, my favorite quote is from Jack, which is the second one highlighted there. Any company is a damn fool if they don't support open standards. It's become really important for the vendor community to serve the needs of industry with open solutions. To summarize, there are many advantages: flexibility, sustainability, efficiency, access and to information, and the opportunity to improve processes and to save money. And on the final slide, it's clear that this mandate from AASHTO is not alone, and there are many transportation authorities and public owners that are indeed mandating and specifying that open standards and open BIM be utilized. So with that, I'd like to hand it off to Morgan.
Yeah, hello all, and thank you. My name is Morgan Kessler, and I'm a civil engineer at the Turner Fairbank Highway Research Center in McLean, Virginia. I'm also a project manager for FHWA on this interesting effort. The work is being performed through a somewhat unique joint effort between FHWA and NCHRP, and we at FHWA went this route because it was felt early in the development of the work scope that an effort like this would best be carried out with a panel of experts, just like that of a classic NCHRP project that I'm sure a bunch of you have participated on. Over the past few years, FHWA has made significant investment in the research, development, deployment of concepts and technologies around the larger topic of BIM for infrastructure. The agency is continuing this work through multiple efforts such as this one, and also ED6 technologies and other research, development, and also program side efforts as well. The driver for this present work that we're talking about today was twofold. One, we identified the need to not only begin to demonstrate the nuts and bolts business case benefits of using BIM for infrastructure, but also the need to come up with new tools and messaging to communicate these benefits to a wide-ranging target audience. And we believe this project addresses both of these goals. So with that, knowing time is short, I'll thank you for attending today and pass the presentation on to Alexa. Thank you.
Thanks, Morgan. And Randy, if we can advance to the next slide. Morgan just covered the research overview, so let's move on to the next one. I would like to take just a few seconds to acknowledge our panel members and our research team, as you see on the slide. The panel is being chaired by Lance Parvey, and our project team is composed of HDR, Penn State University, Juarez, and Fernanda Leche. Let's go to the next one. All right, so the business case framework developed for this study compares total benefits to total cost, uses a 10-year return period of analysis, and a 4% social discount rate. The benefits in the ROI tool are mapped to what we call the use cases of BIM. The more use cases, the more benefits are realized. And so we also discovered that the number of use cases deployed by an organization also correlates to their capability to use BIM more effectively. One of the things that is unique to our ROI tool from this study is that the analysis was performed at a program level rather than project level like others. In doing so, we identified 24 benefits and 15 types of cost, although not all of these were able to be monetized during the study. So furthermore, for the purpose of the study, BIM was defined as performing object-based 3D modeling. Just like John explained a little earlier, terminology is important, and so we needed to set the basis for that. The base case for the study was defined as business as usual, other than your regularly scheduled software and hardware investments. The investment case, however, was defined as investing in a new BIM technology that required training, technical support, and other resources that you needed to enable BIM methods for both project delivery and asset management. So the base case represents the level of BIM adoption and could start at level 0, which is pre-BIM, not doing anything, to level 1 or 2, and could be compared to an investment case or a desired level of BIM capability, if you will, that could be 1, 2, and 3. So the returns from achieving different levels of BIM adoption are not expected to be linear. So for example, going from 0 to 1 generates fewer benefits than going from 1 to 2. So moving on, so what did we learn from this study? At the beginning of the project, we set out to answer 4 questions. The first one being, can benefits be quantified? And yes, we identified 20 quantifiable benefits. I said earlier 24 benefits, but 4 of those were qualitative, 20 quantitative. Are there benefits of BIM substantial enough to justify the investment required by implementation? And we discovered that yes, based on the 6 benefits and 7 costs we were able to monetize. And what is the cost of doing nothing? Long-term cost of making this investment is likely to be significant. And that's because there are different ways that you realize to maximize the benefits, right? So the more you do with BIM, the more benefits that you are going to realize. And you're already probably paying for the software that allows you to do a lot of things. So you might as well get the benefits as well. And then to strive to adopt that higher BIM maturity. And I can't say enough about open BIM standards like Ian mentioned. That really helps maximize your benefits. So what you expect from the products of this research, of course, the biggest one is the Excel-based toolkit, a multimedia package that Morgan spoke about. And so that would include 2 webinars, and there are likely to be scheduled in August. So if you register for this webinar, we are going to make sure that you receive a registration link when that is available. A final report, of course, that includes all the tasks and products of the study. The study ends at the end of August, and after that, the product should be available there soon after at the TRB website. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Eric.
Thank you, Alexa. You all have done such a great job of outlining what is important and why. And as a contractor, I get to step into this space and talk about how all of the things that you're doing impact my workflows. Let's go ahead and jump to the next slide. And there's a quote that I love from a guy named Craig Mundy. And if you're wondering who that is and you start to search him, the first suggestion will be net worth, because he was the chief research officer for a long time at Microsoft. But he made the statement that software creates the new baseline that the person looking to solve the next problem just starts with. You get to start at that new layer and add your value. And to take all of those concepts that we've been discussing and talk about that in the application of an infrastructure project, it means I get to start with a 3D model of a utility and add my information. I get to add information about the trench width, what the pipe bedding needs to be, and all of these things are just much easier than going through and trying to read through a set of plans and reverse engineer some information that I need to be able to go perform work. I just get to start with a complete version of the model and add my contractor information. Let's go to the next slide. And the way that this plays out into any job site is it allows us to shorten the distance between design intent to field execution. And that's through things like automated machine guidance. And that's through things like augmented reality and being able to perform inspections and QA/QC checks in the field with direct connections to the models that you all are making. That model we refer to as a single source of truth. It is the thing that has been most reviewed. It is the thing that has been most perfected to express the true design intent. And at the end of the day, we end up with a greater predictability on all of our job sites when we're executing from that model and able to kind of peek back through time and look at the actual application of that design and all of those standards at every inch of the project. Throughout my presentation, I've included some QR codes. If you look at those with any mobile device, they'll pull up a link to articles or videos that are good references to kind of elaborate on some of these ideas that I'm speaking about. Let's go to the next slide. And to kind of walk through this and apply it to a specific instance, here we have a typical type G curb and gutter. This one happens to be from the Arizona Department of Transportation, but it's got its shape outline, it has some hard dimensions, and then it has some variable dimensions. Let's go to the next slide. And if we kind of zoom out and look at the perspective of this, we can see that a lot of DOTs use almost the exact same design language to really be able to focus in on things. And if we take the Florida DOT example here and kind of imagine that we extrude it into 3D space, we can start to look at things like where that curb gutter flow line is, what the bottom area is, what the volume is, and even what the top back of curb is. And I highlighted those specific items because all of those are important to me as a builder. We quantify things based on the gutter flow line length. We go in and have to fine grade the area below the curb to be able to go in and construct these elements properly, right? So there's different components of this 3D model that are extremely important to us. And when the 3D model is already created, we have the ability to go in and extract this information just when we need it. Our estimating team doesn't need to know the specific 3D surface for the bottom of that curb, but they care about that length of gutter. And then when we go to lay out these elements in the field, we go off of the top and back of curb. And so we can go in and extract that 3D information as well. And all of this is just like Craig Mundy mentioned, building on top of that last piece of technology, that last piece of information that was inserted into this. Let's go to the next slide. Another good example is a MSE wall. And these are very complicated shapes as they dynamically change, their strap lengths change. We have to record the actual bid item for the panel area versus the actual item based on what supplier we're using. But it kind of covers 5 different quantity types. We have a volume of engineered fill. Let's advance to the next slide. Area of MSE panels, we have a length of precast coping. We're also going to need a count of expansion joints in there, and we're even going to need information on the weight of the rebar in that leveling pad at the bottom. But all of this can be actually communicated through some very basic information that I refer to as a minimum viable geometry, which is effectively a horizontal and vertical alignment and profile. And that allows us to apply those standards to be able to recreate any slice of that MSE wall. And from there, we can use a single model that allows us to generate, let's go to the next slide. That allows us to generate all of our quantities. We can see that in the bigger context of the earthwork. So not just what the quantities are for that MSE wall, but how much excavation needs to be done, how much special material backfill needs to be done. Does that correspond an appropriate line with the roadway profile? All of those things can be answered. And when we use the minimum viable geometry and appropriate intelligent templates or assemblies, we are able to recreate that in a shorter amount of time, be able to generate quantities, and then if we're selected for the project, we can take all of that same data and be able to push it directly to the field, again shortening that distance between the design intent and field execution. Let's go to the next slide. And this is important for us, not just because it's helping us have higher performance, more predictability, and be able to get a lot better quality. But those that are coming into the construction industry are expecting to not have to trace cross sections for the first year or 2 of their career. That's not how they want to quantify things. They want to be able to get in and leverage modern technology to develop excellent construction solutions. And so as we look at interns coming into SUNT, we have identified that they really enjoy using these new technologies. Being able to see something in 3D solidifies their understanding and what it's supposed to look like in the field. We get a lot better quality product that's much more accurate on the back end of it as well. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And this is an example of us using these tools to be able to go in and show this is the kind of excavation we need, this is the kind of backfill, these are how we're generating quantities. We can generate cross sections that are loaded with construction information that's layered on top of the design information. And all of that also corresponds to the 3D visual of the model. So that way when we start to go in and we we call it a haystack condition, but here in the middle of these two MSE walls, we can't just bring in, it's not wide enough to be able to bring in just kind of general fill. So we have some additional construction quantities that need to be accounted for here. And this kind of technology allows us to be able to go in and look at all of this in context. And again, I've said it a million times and I'm going to say it a million more, but allows us to add our construction information to this as opposed to starting from a plan sheet where we have to go in and recreate the design and then add construction information. So those QR codes, there's some references in there to automated machine guidance case studies to talk about how that impacts our productivity in the field. The first one was an ENR link about how these kinds of technologies are going to be changing the way we can perform construction. And if we go to the next slide, we actually have a link to a oh, looks like it disappeared, but we had a link to a video for an AGC Innovation Award. And if you search Sunt Construction AGC Innovation Award, you can see some technology that we've actually developed inside of Civil 3D to be able to pull in quantities and in the right ways and means, and then also be able to generate some automated machine guidance data in a pretty straightforward manner. I'd like to pass it off to Alexa now to continue with the next content. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric, and thanks everybody for your presentations. They were very informative. I know we didn't have a lot of time, but I think we have a couple of minutes for maybe a couple of questions. I want to remind people that they can definitely add their questions to the Q&A box, and we will be on the lookout for those so that we can moderate and refer those questions to our speakers. So I'm not seeing a lot of questions. And so in the interest of time, I will continue to monitor the Q&A. So please add your questions. And then at the very end of the webinar, we will have another opportunity to answer some of your questions. So with that, I am going.
Alexa, I'm actually going to ask Eric a question.
Perfect.
Eric, you had kind of flashed up a slide there with someone who looked like they may be fresh out of college, and you said kind of catering to them. What are you seeing on the other side for old codgers like me? How are they taking this change?
That is an excellent question. And so one of my favorite narratives around this subject is we have an individual, his name is Jeff Tejan. He's with our concrete group. And he is somebody who just loves to get in and kind of tweak around with new things. And he was actually our leader for our concrete group in implementing 3D models into pre-construction services for concrete. And I was like, hey, Jeff, what makes this so valuable for you? And he was like, you know what? He was like, I actually have a great example. He was like, we changed some shear walls on this building that we were working on. And instead of me having to spend probably 4 to 8 hours working with the design team and the owner to show them why there was $1 million added for formwork, he's like, I was able to just show a 3D model and it turned into a 30-minute web meeting. He's like, so it took me maybe another hour to go in and update my model and update some of these things. He was like, but the value that I get is that I can communicate so much clearer and so much more quickly, right? And I think he's on the kind of, if you imagine a spectrum, he's on the innovation spectrum, and he doesn't necessarily wholeheartedly adopt every technology, but in moments where that value makes sense, I think anybody's likely to move in that direction. We also run into folks, we have somebody on our pre-construction team in transportation who every time I would go through and do a 3D model and generate quantities from it, all he wanted was a printout to put in his three ring binder for that estimate. And so I think every company is going to have the spectrum of somebody who's like, yeah, I don't care how you got these numbers, just print it out for me and I'll go through and I'm going to work on them, right? But we were talking about how do you quantify value, and I think two organizations can literally have the same process and the same tools and technologies, and it does come down a lot to people. And you made a reference to age, but from what I've seen, it's honestly not super well defined by age. I imagine there's some sort of bias in there, but it's actually really much more about how does somebody approach their job and do they think it's their responsibility to innovate, whether that pressure comes from internally in the organization just pushing to do better, or whether that's an outside market influence of somebody's going to do better on this other job because of these things. But it did create some interesting opportunities for me when I was working a little bit more closely with specific bids to be able to get in, generate these quantities, and then understand how estimators needed to use them. Because I had to fill in that gap, right? I had to fill in the gap between the 3D model and a 3-ring binder. And there was just a lot of knowledge and subject matter expertise in between those two moments. Does that answer your question, George?
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would like to add, since we have a couple of minutes yet, that yeah, everything that Eric has mentioned is right on, right? So if I could summarize, it's about providing value to someone's job, regardless of their age or their task. If digital delivery provides value to do their job better or faster or easier way, you know, people would want to give it a try, right? So it's that our jobs is to demonstrate the value of digital delivery to specific tasks, why you would want to consider it if you weren't on board to begin with. And I find that to always be the case when I talk to people. They might have not been the first ones to say, I really want to try this. But once you start talking to people and try to understand their pain points, and you find a technology that helps them solve a problem that gives them that pain point. I think that's really important to keep in mind. It's not that we're just using technology for technology's sake, but we are finding value in these technologies.
Totally agree, Alexa. Good point. I think we're ready to move on to the next session. Is that correct?
Yes.
So with that, our next session is going to be moving your organization to digital delivery, and both a state DOT and a contractor perspectives. We're going to first start with a DOT perspective from John Wilkerson, and then a contractor perspective from Lance Greer. And then we're going to move on to a panel discussion about moving organizations to digital delivery. But before I hand this off to John, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the bios of the panel discussion, and then after Lance finishes, we'll move right into the questions. So for our panel, our first panel member is Brenda Crudelli. Brenda Crudelli is the director of the Structures Design Bureau at New York State DOT. She oversees in-house bridge design projects throughout the state, is involved with the Bridge New York program, and has been involved with many accelerated design and construction bridge projects. She's been employed by New York State DOT for 19 years. She got her bachelor's degree in civil engineering from Clarkson University, master's degree in structural engineering from Lehigh University, and is a registered PE in New York State. Alan Melly graduated from the University of Pittsburgh with a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering. He's a registered professional engineer in Pennsylvania. He has been with the Department of Transportation for over 21 years. He has progressed through the design ranks where he managed numerous projects ranging from $100,000 to $300 million. Mr. Melly relocated to central office in 2016 and has held the position of project development engineer. He's now on special assignment leading PennDOT's Digital Delivery Directive 2025 initiative. Lance Greer is a third-generation professional land surveyor with over 30 years experience in the industry. Specializing in construction, Lance serves as the director of construction technology for Clyde Companies. He and his wife Kim are the proud parents of 3 very rowdy teenagers and live in Highland, Utah. Beyond his love for construction and advancing emerging technologies and techniques in that industry, Lance enjoys spending time in his yard doing yard work. Mowing his lawn is his Zen rock garden. It gets mowed several times a week, and being a surveyor, the lines are straight. He also enjoys attending various sport leagues that his kids participate in, as well as spending time outdoors camping, hiking, and fishing. Volleyball is the greatest sport of all time, according to Lance, and he can normally be found with a cold Diet Coke in hand or nearby. Eric Silwick leads Suns Construction's frontline construction technologies. Silwick focuses on adapting building information modeling models from the office to the field for Sun's front lines. He now focuses on digital tools that highlight technology's capability to enhance the way construction is performed in the field. Focusing on infrastructure, Silwick has been able to capitalize on parametric modeling to create construction quality bridge, road, and trench models that are used for survey surfaces, machine control, quantity takeoffs, utility coordination, construction reviews, and visualizations. So with that, I'm going to hand this off to John, and John's going to give the perspective of how an agency might move their organization to digital delivery, that framework.
Thanks, George. One of the first things I want to say, if you can move to the next slide, Randy, is when you look at the levels, and this is what we've been working on with the JTCES, and I can't help but not pay attention to where we're at, because a lot of this drives some of the things that we do directly in Michigan. But you need to really look at level 5 when you're looking at this and thinking about this. Once we get all this documentation done, I think we're around level 2 right now. But look at level 5, and even if you're not going to go there, in the near future, have an idea of when you might get there, and then look at it and see where you think you're at, not just as an agency, but with different disciplines or different work types. So really, this kind of progresses from the bottom, level 1 up to level 5. And it starts out with what a lot of us are kind of doing right now, and really leveraging that 3D modeling power and the technology that exists today, but using that to create plans that are still the contract. And then you progress through these levels where you start introducing the model as information only. In Michigan, we call that reference information documents, or RID for short. And then you start piloting contractual delivery, and you move into contractual delivery without plans, and then finally maturing to that point where you're taking the model data from design through construction and into your asset management inventory. I would say in Michigan, we're somewhere between 2 and 3 on some of the asset types, and even starting to investigate like a level 4 for asset collection during construction for like guardrail, cable barrier, and culverts. So with that, how the maturity matrix or the maturity model is set up, next slide, is we really focus on the readiness of the people and the processes around the maturity. So really focusing on all those stakeholders and thinking about what resources they need and how you can bring them forward. We even include, those resource agencies and permits and all parts of the asset life cycle. For each group, so that's on the left, you got to get the readiness for all the different stakeholders. On the right is really all the slices of pie that you need to either complete or eat, depending on which side you're on. And really that includes the hardware, the software, the training. And one of the important pieces that we look at as JTCES members is how can we help you get started down the road of BIM maturity. So with that, I'll pass it over to Lance.
Thank you very much. My name's Lance Greer, and I'm a contractor here in the Intermountain West, and we wanted to talk about adapting and embracing change to maximize efficiency within our organization. So a couple things to keep in mind as a contractor, and for all of us in general, is that the only thing that we know for sure is that we have death taxes, and everything always changes. And so as a contractor here in the field, we never get anything that actually works the way it's supposed to. There's always time to adapt to change. And our company this year is 97 years old. And so we have the opportunity to have a long look backwards about exactly what's been done in the past and what we can do going forward, and choose whether or not we're going to adapt to change. But to a shout out to our company's founder, may he rest in peace. His famous quote that we use is that history and civilizations are defined by the manner in which they build. And so I have a couple shots there of older construction and newer construction. And as a History Channel connoisseur, it's interesting for people to go back and look at what's been built, and they use that to kind of derive how sophisticated a society was. And we're no different now. So what are the ways that we're building now, and how will that define what we're doing? Next slide. So on the left-hand side is some photos. As was mentioned, George mentioned, I'm the third generation of surveyors in my family. That's my grandfather and my dad in the 1950s on the left-hand side, using technology of the day. Above that was one of W.W. Clyde's first scrapers, and honestly, they started by using horse-drawn equipment, and they actually had a full-time person that would keep care of their animals because that was important at that time. So within our own company's knowledge, we've seen things change a lot. Through the middle, you see the old school UDOT plan set. And then on the right-hand side, the technologies that we're currently leveraging. So next slide. What's enabled the change in construction, and it's happened throughout, but is the game change lately, and it's really seen an acceleration in the last 15 to 20 years, is obviously the availability of technology in construction and the ability to leverage it into the field and accurately deliver some of these products. My training and my family history is in surveying, and there's been some giant leaps forward in the way that that type of data is leveraged out in the field. I often will joke with my dad that in any given day that I will gather more survey data in one session of surveying in a day than my grandfather maybe did in 60 years together. So technology has definitely enabled this, but it also presents a challenge. And the challenge within the contracting world was, how do we use this efficiently? Is it worth the investment? And once it is worth the investment, how do we get buy-in from top level down to the field so that the implementation just isn't for estimating or just isn't for stuff in the office, but we can actually use it at an on-project field level to leverage this, and then going forward to actually use the data that we gather to help ourselves in the future by using a 3D, 4D, and 5D type model, and then have a total asset management workflow that gets the data as we've constructed it, so that we're not constantly redoing some of the things that we always do when we start projects, like potholing for utilities and finding stuff that we just recently buried. And there's a large use case in construction for this, but within our own company, one of the main challenges has always been to analyze whether or not what's currently out there we can actually make work in the field. Is it worth the investment? And then have we set the expectation and kind of the theme that people realize that this can actually help them, how it can help them, and then we utilize it and implement it in the field. So next slide, final slide. These are examples of the digital workflow being implemented where we currently work in Intermountain West, and we've been able to partner with and work alongside the Utah Department of Transportation in order to use these digital delivery products and actually take them from field to finish, work through some of the kinks, and celebrating the successes, and cry together a little bit with some of the pain points. But it's been a journey for all of us, and from our estimators through our project superintendents down to the foreman level, having this type of data real time available to them in the field has been game changing. And then in order to return this data back to the department at the end is next level. Final slide. So using the JTCES BIM maturity model, we've been able to, through some, and it isn't necessarily that it was without its stumbling points, but we've been able to get to a level 4, level 5 type of delivery model, and alongside with UDOT, have the experience of getting an all digital delivery project, taking it in that type of scenario, using it, actually using it in the field, real-time collaborating with our designers to make needed changes, and then returning the data back in an as-built format for future use. So it definitely is something that can be done. It's something that you have to kind of decide as a company and as a person and down to our foreman level that this is a change that's needed and we're going to embrace it. And like Eric alluded to, that with his quote, this is just the basis for the next change. And so we're excited for what's coming next. And with that, I'll turn it back over.
All right, so now we're going to move on to our panel discussion. And I'm going to hand it off to Alexa to start the questions.
Thanks, George. And if we can advance one more slide, that would be great. All right, so here are our panelists. We are not able to share cameras today, so we thought we at least show you a picture of them. So the first question I have is, where is your organization in terms of maturity? Where are you at, and what have you done to get to that maturity steps that John spoke about? And if we can start with Brenda, I'll give you the first go, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, great. Thanks, Alexa. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So at New York State DOT, for our normal design bid build projects, I would say we're right around at a level 3, maybe 2.5, 3. We use models to create the 2D plans that we have as our contract documents. We have moved forward with 2 pilot projects where we've jumped up to the level 4, which would be the model as the legal contract document. We have finished our first project, is finishing in construction right now this summer. And our second pilot project is actually in the procurement phase right now. So we're hoping to award that in the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Great. So Alan, I'm interested to hear your perspective on where PennDOT is.
Sure. PennDOT right now is probably at a 2, looking at advancing up to the level 4. We have a mixture in various aspects. We have not put out the model as a legal document yet. With our directive, that is digital delivery 2025, we plan to meet that goal of delivering the model as the legal document for 2025. So we're trying to take a stepped approach where we, basically walk, crawl, walk, run. We're piloting various aspects of digital delivery along the way, and then implementing those as we go. So we are a mixture of, 2, 3 area at this point right now.
Great, thank you. And we heard both from Lance and Eric, but if you could give us a additional story of your journey, that would be fantastic. So Eric, how about we start with you?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Alexa. Yeah, I would, on this scale, I would categorize us as a level 2, and some of that's by choice, and some of that's just based on the partners that we work with. We've actually run into quite a few design teams and projects in different states and in different subjects where we ask for the CAD files, which we have to request, right, in addition to the plans, and they'll deliver a perfectly curated 3D model. And so there's moments where we're solidly in level 2, but it's just a communication thing. But one thing that we're really striving to do is I think that there's actually quite a bit of ground and differentiation between levels 2 and 3. And we're just focusing on getting, I mentioned minimum viable geometry, but things along those lines. Well, when we do a design build, we will go through and look at the typical sections and identify specific lines that need to end up on specific layers. Because I think there's a lot of hesitation and perceived risk with sharing a model, but if you can boil it down to specific kind of critical geometry points, it tends to be a much easier conversation. And we've noticed that we get a lot better response from our design partners because they get to focus on less of a general model and more specific pieces of data that are being transferred between the parties. So we're solidly working towards 3, and as I mentioned, it's kind of different dependent upon the market and our partners. But design builds, we tend to see a lot more traction towards level 3, where we have a lot more kind of synchronization with them. And then as we talk about kind of a hard bid traditional model, we tend to either be in level 1 or level 2.
Great, thanks, Eric. And Lance, you were just telling us a little bit about what you are doing, and you definitely do a lot of work for Utah, who is one of the lead states. And I'm just curious to hear your perspective on the types of projects you work for and the challenges that you may have between working for Utah DOT and maybe another client.
Well, definitely. I mean, the challenge and one of the things, the market is going this way. And so from a business perspective, we need to, as a contractor, these BIM maturity model levels, I mean, are kind of made towards, your DOT type client, your designers, to have that type of level of sophistication. But our goal as a contractor is honestly to be able to not only be able to deal with and be able to succeed with a level 4 and level 5 type deliverable. And so we need to work ourselves to a point where that's a strength of ours and not a weakness. When you're doing that type of analysis and we can see where the industry is going, then you either lead, follow, or get run over. And so we would like to be at the forefront of that. So we've had the opportunity to, as Eric mentioned, there's still projects where we get things in the level 1, level 2. There's a lot of pain points in requesting digital information with the 5-page disclaimer about how you're not allowed to use it. All the way up to, we've done several of these projects with UDOT, nearly a dozen now, where we've gone a level 4, level 5 digital delivery projects, and we're finishing up a couple of them right now. And so we've been able to kind of work within and in between, but the idea for us is that we need to make this a strength and not a weakness, and that we need to be able to adapt and use this type of technology in the field and have it be part of our native workflow. And so for the past 20 years or so, with the advent of AMG, you'll find that most of your contractors are very comfortable at this point using 3D models in construction. So there's been an argument made that, maybe that's not necessarily the case, but at least in our region, it's the exception now and not the rule of someone that doesn't use automated machine control. So they are using a 3D model to implement at the construction level. Some of these other ideas are in addition to that, but something that we're trying to be at the forefront of. So our experience has been and continues to be honestly dealing with levels 1 through 5, but the 5 is where I would like to be, and we work with our Department of Transportation to kind of help with that, and we've done it both in alternative procurement, design build type scenarios, but also we're delivering our first, I would say, level 4.5, almost 5 bid build project this way as well. So it's been an experience for sure. We've had some pushback from young and old. We've had adaptation from young and old, and so we kind of get the gamut of it. But once we get pushback from it a little bit, generally after you work through some of the pain points and issues that people have, resolved some of their concerns, some of our biggest naysayers for adopting this technology in the field are now the biggest proponents and champions.
Thanks, you guys. I'm gonna ask some real quick follow-up questions. I'm gonna start with Brenda. After hearing sort of what Lance and Eric said, what have your challenges been with kind of moving that information on your models legal document projects from design to construction, both from the design to the contractor as well as the design to your own inspection crews?
Right. So one of the biggest challenges that we've had is just keeping everybody informed. And what I mean by that is internal and external. So on the internal side, there's many groups within the department that touch a project as it moves throughout the life. So if we could just stick with design, we'd be fine, right? We can learn our way through and we'd be all set. But there's so many different groups that touch a project that we have had many internal meetings, and we found that it's not enough just to send the email or even just meet with everybody once. If you're not dealing with it day to day, it's easy to forget what's going on. So we try to meet with people before it's their turn to be involved with the project, and especially construction, right? So construction is aware of what's going on during the design. but we provide lots of training for them during review process, before construction, and then maintain that during construction as well. One of the other challenges that we've had with our projects is, picking the right project. So we have certain projects that are coming down our pipeline, and we try to pick one that meets our needs for model-based contracting at DOT, and that can be a challenge. You're looking for something that's has enough monetary value that it's worthwhile for the contractor, but you're also looking for something. It'd be nice if it wasn't super duper complicated, but that's what we end up doing is we can't always fit the cookie cutter in the software, so we have to make the software work for us the best we can. So getting the software to do what we need to do has also been a challenge.
Thanks, Brenda. Great perspective. Alan, I know you guys are in a little bit different stage, but what are you seeing as your biggest challenges to move from, I think you had self-described level 2 to where you want to be, whether it's short term or ultimately in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, really, it's one of the challenges that we have is picking that correct project, just like Brenda was saying. With the project development process, in Pennsylvania, it takes a while to get through all of those processes. So selecting the correct project that, to get us to the various levels. We have a roadmap set up that, we want to hit various aspects such as bridge in 2023 and, drainage in 2024. With picking those projects, a lot of those projects right now are already under design. So we're going to have to, add additional, work to those projects to test and pilot these various aspects. So picking that is, been a difficulty for us. We're also moving to the open roads platform right now. So that has been a big challenge internally, as well as our users are getting used to not only the ORD platform, but also into the digital delivery realm. So we've definitely had our challenges, but those are two that come to mind at this point.
Great, thanks, Alan. Eric, how about you guys? I know I'm just going to guess that you have, like you were talking, a large range of clients that you're working with, but whether it's the ones that are just coming along or the ones that are giving you great models, what is the biggest challenge you've encountered so far?
Yeah, I think the biggest, so kind of like give a tandem example here. I feel like there's moments where our organization would have totally bought into email and all of our partners would not have email capabilities. And what ends up happening is we might use it for internal communication, but it totally nullifies any effect that we would have to be able to enhance our speed of communication to outside parties, right? And so there's moments where we've had to go in and actually create models of a project where they would not release plan or digital plans and show them all of the coordination issues